Yoyam yoga tvaya prokta samyena madhusudana etasyaham na pashyami chanchala stitim stiram. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga, which you have summarized, appears impractical and unendurable to me. For the mind is restless and unsteady. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Okay. Arjuna said, the system of mysticism described by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, beginning with the words Sucho Dese and ending with Yogi Parama, is here being rejected by Arjuna out of a feeling of inability. It is not possible for an ordinary man to leave home and go to a secluded place in the mountains or jungles to practice yoga in the age of Kali Yuga. The present age is characterized by a bitter struggle for a life of short duration. People are not serious about self-realization, even by simple practical means. And what to speak of this difficult yoga system, which regulates the mode of living, the manner of sitting, selection of place, and detachment of the mind from material engagements. As a practical man, Arjuna thought it was impossible to follow this system of yoga, even though he was favorably endowed in many ways. He belonged to the royal family and was highly elevated in terms of numerous qualities. He was a great warrior. He had great uh, he had great longevity, and above all, he was the most intimate friend of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 5,000 years ago, Arjuna had much better facilities than we do now. Yet, he refused to accept the system of yoga. In fact, we do not find any record in the history of his practicing it at any time. Therefore, this system must be considered generally impossible in the age of Kali Yuga. Of course, it may be possible for some very few rare men, but for the people in general, it is an impossible proposal. If this were so 5,000 years ago, then what of the present day? Those who are imitating this yoga system in different so-called schools and societies, although complacent, are certainly wasting their time. They are completely in ignorance of the desired goal. Well, the desired goal is to attain pure love and devotion for Krishna and engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Text 34. Chanchalam hi manat Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayar eva suduskaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, and obstinate, and very strong. O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the winds. Well, that's a very correct statement. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence, although the mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence. For a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind artificially. One may establish a mental equilibrium toward both friend and enemy, but ultimately, no worldly man can do so. for this is more difficult than controlling the raging wind. In the Vedic literature, Katha Upanishad 1.3, point 3-4, it is said, Atmanam Ratinam Vidhi, Sariram Ratam Evacha, Buddhim tu Saratim Vidhi, Mana Prograham Evacha, Indriyani Hayan Ahur, Vishayans Tesu Gochran, Atmendriya Mano Yuktam, Bok Teti Ahur Manisana. The individual is the passenger in the car of the material body, and intelligence is the driver. Mind is the driving instrument, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So, it is understood by great thinkers. Intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence, as an acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine. Such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga, but such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The great mantra for deliverance in all humility. The method prescribed is Savai Manak Krishna Padara Vindayo. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. Okay, very good. Yeah, the mind is very easily agitated by sense gratification. And the one thing that can immediately take control of the mind is sex desire. One can forget everything about spiritual life due to sex desire. So one has to be very careful. Number one, associate only with genuine devotees and avoid the association with non-devotees. That's the beginning of spiritual life. I mean, you can talk to non-devotees in a sense as co-workers or relatives, but you shouldn't associate with them closely because they will eat meat, they'll talk about sex, they'll talk about money, they'll talk about vacations, they'll talk about so many mundane things that are more or less nonsense. So best is to keep a distance, whether they're family members or they are co-workers, etc. That doesn't mean you can't talk to them, but you don't want to sit down and see them eat meat. You don't want to hear what their vacation was, etc. Okay, so in the purport, it says, the mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence. Although the mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence. For a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. Artificially, one may establish a mental equilibrium toward both friend and enemy, but ultimately no worldly man can do so. For this, is more difficult than controlling the raging wind. In the Vedic literature, Kathopanishad 1.3, 3.3-4, it is said, Atmanam Ratinam Vidi Sarinam Ratam Evacha Buddhim tu Saratim Vidhi Mana Prograham Evacha Indriyani Hayan Ahur Vishayam Tesu Gocharan Tam Bhokte Ti Ahur Mani Sana. The individual is the passenger in the car of the material body, and intelligence is the driver. Mind is the driving instrument, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So it is understood by great thinkers. Intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence, as an acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine. Such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga, but such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The great mantra for deliverance in all humility. The method prescribed is Savai Manat Krishna Padaravindayo. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. There it is, Hare Krishna. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Yeah. Text number 35. Shri Bhagavan Uvasha Asamsayam Mahabaho Manodur Nigraham Chalam Abhyasena Tukonteya Vairagena Cha Giyate. Lord Sri Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Well, what's the suitable practice? Practicing Krishna consciousness. And detachment means that you take your mind away from nonsense and avoid nonsense people and avoid associate only with genuine devotees and always seeking out the association of genuine devotees. In that way, you'll be able to control the mind much easier than any other way. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The difficulty of controlling the obstinate mind, as expressed by Arjuna, is accepted by the personality Godhead. But at the same time, he suggests that by practice and detachment, it is possible. It is possible. What is that practice? In the present age, no one can observe the strict rules and regulations of placing oneself in a sacred place, focusing the mind on the super soul, restraining the senses and mind, observing celibacy, remaining alone, etc. By practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one engages in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. The first and foremost of such devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. This is very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. The more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from activities not devoted to Krishna, one can very easily learn vairagya. Vairagya means detachment from matter and engagement of the mind and spirit. Impersonal spiritual detachment is more difficult than attaching the mind to the activities of Krishna. This is practical because by hearing about Krishna, one becomes automatically attached to the Supreme Spirit, Krishna. This attachment is called parisanubhava, spiritual satisfaction. It is just like the feeling of satisfaction a hungry man has for every morsel of food he eats. The more one eats while hungry, the more one feels satisfaction and strength. Similarly, by discharge of devotional service, one feels transcendental satisfaction as the mind becomes detached from material objectives. It is something like curing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. Hearing of the transcendental activities of the Lord is therefore expert treatment for the mad mind, and eating the foodstuff offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness. Yeah, all right, hearing about Krishna and eating only prasadam. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, prasadam is very important for making spiritual advancement. And associating with genuine devotees is equally important if you want to have a spiritual life. And then, of course, chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the association of devotees is most important for becoming Krishna conscious. If you associate with devotees all the time, you will chant Hare Krishna. If you avoid the association of devotees and want to chant in a private place, well, it will eventually lead to lesser and lesser, let's say, engagement in the Krishna consciousness. But regularly keeping the association of devotees and chanting Hare Krishna with them will make one stronger in the determination to chant always the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and in the association of devotees. Text 36. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. In other words, unbridled means it's not controlled. So for those whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. In other words, for one whose mind is out of control, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. So this is Krishna speaking. So we should give up the association of non-devotees, and we should strive to associate with devotees and hear from devotees about Krishna. Then we are assured of success. And that is Krishna's opinion. So his opinion means a lot. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead declares that one who does not accept the proper treatment to detach the mind from material engagement can hardly achieve success in self-realization. Trying to practice yoga while engaging the mind in material enjoyment is like trying to ignite a fire while pouring water on it. Yoga practice without mental control is a waste of time. Such a show of yoga may be materially lucrative, meaning you might be able to make money making a show of yoga, but it is useless as far as spiritual realization is concerned. Therefore, one must control the mind by engaging it constantly in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Unless one is engaged in Krishna consciousness, he cannot steadily control the mind. A Krishna conscious person easily achieves the result of yoga practice without separate endeavor, but a yoga practitioner cannot achieve success without becoming Krishna conscious. Okay, so simply doing yoga is not recommended. Mm. But if you practice yoga and at the same time engage in devotional service, well, that will work. Or engage full time in Krishna consciousness, that'll work even better. Mm. Text 37. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism, meaning in Krishna consciousness? That's a very good question by Arjuna. You can tell that he's a very highly enlightened personality to ask a question like that. Yeah. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The path of self-realization or mysticism is described in the Bhagavad Gita. The basic principle of self-realization is knowledge that the living entity is not this material body, but that he is different from it, and that his happiness is in eternal life, bliss, and knowledge. These are transcendental beyond both body and mind. Self-realization is sought by the path of knowledge, by the practice of the Eightfold System, or by Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is the easiest and best way to make spiritual advancement. In each of these processes, one has to realize the constitutional position of a living entity, his relationship with God, and the activities whereby he can reestablish the lost link and achieve the highest perfectional stage of Krishna consciousness. Following any of the above mentioned three methods, one is sure to reach the supreme goal sooner or later. All right, so he says three methods. What are those methods? Well, there's the path of knowledge, and there's the practice of the Eightfold System, or there is Bhakti Yoga. Following any of the above three methods, one is sure to reach the supreme goal sooner or later. This was asserted by the Lord in the second chapter. Even a little endeavor on the transcendental path offers a great hope for deliverance. Out of these three methods, the path of Bhakti Yoga is especially suitable for this age because it is the most direct method of God realization. To be doubly assured, Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna to confirm his former statement. One may sincerely accept the path of self-realization, but the process of cultivation of knowledge and the practice of the Eightfold Yoga System are generally very difficult for this age. Therefore, despite constant endeavor, one may fail for many reasons. First of all, one may not be sufficiently serious about following the process. To pursue the transcendental path is more or less to declare war on the illusory energy, meaning Maya. Consequently, Whenever a person tries to escape the clutches of the illusory energy, she, meaning Maya, tries to defeat the practitioner by various allurements. A conditioned soul is already allured by the modes of material energy, and there's every chance of being allured again, even while performing transcendental disciplines. This is called yoga chalita manasa, deviation from the transcendental path. Arjuna is inquisitive to know the results of deviation from the path of self-realization. Well, yeah, we should know that. You might say, oh, why should we know about that? I don't want to know about deviation. No, we should know what deviation is so that we do not get tricked by clever people to fall down. Text 38. Oh, mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? Yeah, I mean, clouds, sometimes they cover the whole sky, but other times when there's the sun, they start breaking apart. So that's called a riven cloud. Purport. There are two ways to progress. Those who are materialists have no interest in transcendence. Therefore, they are more interested in material advancement by economic development or in promotion to the higher planets by appropriate work. When one takes to the path of transcendence, one has to cease all material activities and sacrifice all forms of so-called material happiness. If the aspiring transcendentalist fails, then he apparently loses both ways. In other words, he can enjoy neither material happiness nor spiritual success. He has no position. He is like a riven cloud. So a cloud that's broken up into small pieces. A cloud in the sky sometimes deviates from a small cloud and joins a big one. But if it cannot join a big one, then it is blown away by the wind and becomes a non-entity in the vast sky. The Brahmana path is the path of transcendental realization through knowing oneself to be spiritual in essence, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, who is manifested as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Lord Sri Krishna is the fullest manifestation of the supreme absolute truth. And therefore, one who is surrendered to the Supreme Person is a successful transcendentalist. To reach this goal of life through Brahman and Paramatma realization takes many, many births. Vahanam Janmanamante. Therefore, the supermost path of transcendental realization is Bhakti Yoga, or Krishna consciousness, the direct method. So you don't have to learn about Brahman, and learn about Paramatma, and learn about Bhagavan. You can go directly to full knowledge by Bhakti Yoga, or Krishna consciousness, the direct method. The other method is indirect. Text 39. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. Purport. Krishna is the perfect knower of past, present, and future. In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord said that all living entities existed individually in the past, they exist now in the present, and they continue to retain individual identity in the future, even after liberation from the material entanglement. So he has already cleared up the question of the future of the individual living entity. Well, he's saying that the individual living entity is eternal in the past, in the present, and the future. Now, the question is, by forgetfulness of one's relationship with Krishna, one can fall down and stay in uh, uh, the prison of repeated birth and death. But if one is enlightened and always engaged in Krishna consciousness, then he progresses more and more in this different levels of spiritual realization and never falls down again. So here it says, okay, I'll read this again. Krishna is a perfect knower of past, present, and future. In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord said that all living entities existed individually in the past, they exist now in the present, and they continue to retain individual identity in the future, even after liberation from the material entanglement. So he has already cleared up the question of the future of the individual living entity. Now, Arjuna wants to know of the future of the unsuccessful transcendentalist. No one is equal to or above Krishna, and certainly so-called great sages and philosophers who are at the mercy of the material nature cannot equal him. Therefore, the verdict of Krishna is the final and complete answer to all doubts, because he knows past, present, and future perfectly. But no one knows him. Krishna and Krishna consciousness devotees alone can know what is what.
Haribol.
Haribol.
Maharaj, we have to go to temples.
Yeah.
To do things.
Okay, we can stop here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, my dear devotees. We're going to stop now, but we'll be at the temple tonight, and hopefully every night, chanting, you know what? Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Maha Mantra Ki Jai. Thank you, and thank you. Okay.